Hello, my dear gardening friends. All year long, we are waiting for beautiful blooms of our roses to arrive in spring. And sometimes our roses can behave as capricious beauties. They might send those blind shoots which end up without a rose, and create a lot of stems without blooms in our garden. So today, in this video, I'm going to talk about what blind shoots are, why they appear in our garden, and there are reasons which we cannot change, and there are definitely situations which we have influence on, what to do with those blind shoots, and how to make sure that our roses will never have blind shoots again, or will have them but to a minimum. All right, my dear Lady of Charlotte, look at the progress she made just in 2 days. There is 2 days difference between last video I filmed, and she had just barely a rose here and there, and now she's starting to come up with beautiful roses more and more. This is not the peak of the performance. She's going to be covered in several days with beautiful orangey roses. And I must say that this year, these roses are not as orange as they were last year at the beginning. Lady of Charlotte, at least in my garden, is famous that at the beginning she comes up with beautiful orange color. And then slowly the color of blooms change into pinkish and fade into this light pink color. But this year I don't see this strong orange color on my rose. Maybe it will change, maybe it depends on the season. We had a very unusual spring, very cold and prolonged spring. But let's talk about blind shoots. So what are blind shoots on our roses? Well, blind shoots are terminal stems which roses produce in spring or at the end of summer, and they do not have a flower bud. Those shoots do not form a flower bud. So those are blind shoots, and sometimes, depending on a lot of conditions, and we will talk about them, roses produce a lot of blind shoots, and as a result, our roses have a lot of vegetation, but they refuse to bloom, and that's what we want from our rose. We want our roses to bloom, right? When you look at my Lady of Charlotte here, I was looking around when I was preparing this video, and I was walking around her trying to figure out where does she have a blind shoot. And I saw very rarely. I see one here and I see one here. You see how it looks? The stem is here and you're waiting for the bloom to happen, like in this situation, right? But it's not happening. Here we have a blind shoot, and it's going to stay like this if we do nothing about it, and it will be like this for the whole year. And this rose will spend energy and time to maintain this branch and just maintain the foliage, but there will be no beautiful blooms on this shoot. So now we know how blind shoots look. And now let's talk about reasons why those blind shoots are produced by our capricious roses in the garden in spring. There are reasons which are connected with weather, and clearly we can't influence weather, we can't have any corrective power on it. But there are also another set of reasons, maintenance mistakes which we are doing to our roses, and we are going to talk about those in depth too. So follow me at the back of my garden, and I will show you reason number 1 why our roses are refusing to create shoots with flowers at the top. Instead, they're creating empty stems. So here we have my poor suffering thing, my rose, which is growing, unfortunately, no matter what I do, it is still growing in shade here. This is Braza Get-File rose. I introduced it in my garden probably several years ago, and so far I had only one bloom from this rose. And here we come with reason number 1, the main reason why our roses will refuse to bloom in spring, which is shady conditions. Too much shade. Now, this rose, of course, we can influence that problem. We can take a shade away. So what I did to this rose, my original plan was to move this baby I decided to keep it here and remove some foliage from the tree above. Also cut away all the branches from this tree here. I built this new arch here, so let's see how this rose is going to work it out. But so far, when you look at this rose closely, you will see that she looks quite miserable, and she does. She didn't create any blooming buds. She didn't set any buds this spring. Everything here is just looking miserable. The one good thing is she is creating a wonderful, beautiful shoot right here, which is not coming from the root system. It's coming from another stem. So I have hopes for this beautiful, wonderful thing here. And very often people say, oh, can I plant a rose in the shade? And some varieties are better suited for shady conditions, at least 4 hours a day. But some varieties are really not good, even with 6 hours. So make sure when you buy a rose, you match your rose well to a spot. So this rose, I'm making mistake with this rose year after year. So let's see how this rose will be doing this year. But if there is not enough sun, next year I have to move it. So reason number 1, shady conditions. Reason number 2 why our beauty roses might refuse to bloom can be unusual cold weather, especially late freezes. For example, this year again we had very late spring, very cold spring. It doesn't look like it influenced my rose a lot, but I can see on my generous gardener here, I can see plenty of blind shoots here, which are not going to produce any blooms this season. So cold weather, late freezing conditions, freezing nights late in the season can all contribute to roses not having not having enough energy. Roses do have energy, but in those situations, but the tissues of those fresh new buds are damaged, and they can be even frozen during those cold weather conditions, and roses will just lose those buds and will create these blind shoots. Those shoots will have a damaged top, and there will be no bloom whatsoever on that rose. Oh, just look how beautiful. Oh. Is there a Japanese beetle already? Oh no, not yet. I'm still waiting for those little buggers to arrive, you know? Oh, the scent is divine. Next reason, which I'm going to talk about, is can be totally corrected, and it is issue with maintenance. How we feed our roses. You have to understand that roses are highly developed plants in the garden, and as I said before in my previous videos, and they do need regular maintenance to keep them beautiful and to produce these wonderful, luxurious blooms. So we do need to feed them in spring before the main flush of blooms. We need to give them supplemental, well-balanced fertilizer. Because if we give our roses unbalanced fertilizer, a lot of leaves can happen on the rose. If the fertilizer is a wrong fertilizer, for example, fertilizer for the grass, where there is a lot of nitrogen, and we are going to feed rose with that fertilizer, rose will create a lot of lush foliage and not so much blooms. So when you shop for fertilizer for roses, pay attention for what those fertilizers are, and I advise you to go for specifically fertilizers for roses. I use Espoma rose fertilizer, or Job rose fertilizer, whatever I can put my hands on. And that food which you provide for the rose, give rose all the energy to produce these wonderful shoots. If rose doesn't have enough food, a rose will create a lot of blind shoots because rose doesn't have energy to create these beautiful blooms, and rose spends a lot of time and energy and invest a lot of resources to create these wonderful, gorgeous blooms. Just look, 2 days after, and my generous gardener, after the rain, is doing very well. Petals are not falling yet. By the way, generous gardener is famous for dropping petals very quickly. Another reason why roses will not bloom is also connected with maintenance. For example, look at this rose. When I was trimming this rose and I saw that one of the stems, you see this stem here, is damaged, I kind of felt pity for the rose and I didn't cut it out. So I left it. And as a result, that rose, this stem died. The shoot which comes out from the stem on another side did create flower buds. But very often when the stem is damaged or it's too old, it will refuse to produce beautiful quality blooms. And it might produce a lot of blind shoots. Also, when we do not cut away all the skinny, all very thin vegetation, meaning thin skinny stems out of the rose bush during spring pruning, rose spends a lot of time to support those skinny stems, and usually those skinny stems are not productive and they do not produce beautiful blooms. So all that stuff has to go during spring pruning. And if we don't do that, rose actually waste energy on all that stuff to keep it going, even if it's half living, and then it doesn't have enough time and energy to create beautiful blooms for us. Now, when we know all the reasons why those blind shoots appearing on our roses in spring, let's talk what to do about them. As for me, what I do in my garden, I leave those blind shoots alone because I don't have so many of them. Majority of my roses are in good condition, and the biggest issue for me would be lack of sun. But majority of my roses are in good sunny conditions and they do not produce blind shoots at all. For example, this Lady of Shalott, it took me a while to find a blind shoot on her. And this is one of those. And usually I would just disregard it, leave it alone. I like my roses to have nice foliage, full foliage, to be nice, bushy, fat shrubs. By the way, there are two Lady of Shalotts here, planted approximately 18 inches apart. And they are growing into each other, forming one big, magnificent bush. So what do we do about it? Very simple. If you really want your blind shoot to maybe produce flower, you just pinch it back to next leaf. You can do it with your hands because it's such a light stem. And when you pinch the stem, eventually, maybe in a week or so, the rose will start producing from these pockets between the leaf and the stem. Rose will start producing other stems, and they might create a rose for you. Now, my back rose, which is growing in the back of the garden, I'm not going to torture it. I'm not going to cut stems because that rose clearly doesn't have energy. So in your case, if you have such a situation where a rose refuses to bloom because you go through all the reasons, you see that there is problems with maintenance, I wouldn't force that rose to create a bloom, because clearly if rose doesn't have enough of energy, rose will refuse. So you have to address those issues with the rose first. And then if you don't have a lot of blind shoots, you can do this situation. That's basically it, what you can do with blind shoots in your garden.